What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. Today, I'm your host, Spencer, joined by Jim from Fantasy for the Ages podcast. And we're going to be talking about the third book in the Wheel of Time series, The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan. I will introduce Jim properly in just a moment, but first, we would really appreciate it if you guys would hit those like and subscribe buttons down below here on YouTube. It really helps out our channel a lot and lets us know that you guys are interested in more content from us. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy for more fantasy related content. Also, stay tuned for our year-end wrap-up video coming out in probably the last week of December. That is going to be a ton of fun, where we look back on 2021 and all our favorite books that we read this year. So yeah, without further ado, Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about what your podcast is, Fantasy for the Ages, where people can check out your content and what kind of stuff you guys read?
I would love to. Thanks, Spencer. It's good to be here. Fantasy for the Ages is a podcast that my son and I do. My son, I managed, simple story here. I didn't have many people to talk about fantasy fiction with. Yeah. So I raised one. My son was indoctrinated into fantasy and sci-fi from a very young age, and he and I now have very similar interests. So about a year ago, we decided, hey, let's do a podcast. Let's share our enjoyment of fantasy and sci-fi with anybody else who's out there. Mostly, it just gives us an excuse to talk about books we love, as well as movies and other oddities from time to time. We decided we could do it in a couple different ways. One, let's work through a series in depth, and then occasionally talk about other content. So we said, well, what series should we start with? And we picked my favorite, it's Zach's favorite as well, The Wheel of Time. So we're working our way through. We have 77 episodes out there now. Ooh. Every Sunday, a new Wheel of Time episode drops. And then about every other Wednesday, we throw something else out on other things we're reading, random stuff we enjoy, whatever. And we call those midweek specials. So awesome. They're out there. The podcast goes pretty deep into the Wheel of Time right now, but it's spoiler light. So we don't ruin what's coming. We just talk about what's happening in the book up to the point where we're at. And we highlight the foreshadowing, give hints of what might be important. Remember this. Right. But we don't ruin anything. So it's great for a first-time reader, but somebody who's already read the whole series, they kind of get all the in jokes between the two of us. They know what we're talking about. Right. Have a good time with it. So you can find us in any of the usual places: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast. We've got a YouTube channel where we're starting to add more videos as well. All our audio content's on YouTube as well, but you just stare at the graphic the whole time you listen. But we're branching out, and we also enjoy collaborating with people. So it's great to be here with you today.
Yeah, this is awesome. Man, that's super cool. It sounds like we have a really similar kind of thing we're doing. Like so we do what you guys do with Wheel of Time, but we do it with the Dresden Files. And so I
love the Dresden Files.
I'm so happy that you're enjoying the Dresden Files. And yeah, so we kind of go book by book. And we don't do like future spoilers or anything. And then kind of the same thing, like we'll make like vague references to what might be coming in the future. So the people that know.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I love the way that you kind of explained how you guys started the podcast, because that's pretty much what happened to us. Gabe and I have been best friends for years now, and I got him into starting with the Dresden Files. I got him into fantasy, and we were kind of like calling each other for like 30 minutes at a time or like an hour at a time, talking about the books on the phone. And some of the conversations we were having were like surprisingly good. And I was like, man, we should just turn this into a podcast. Let's do it.
Other people might like this stuff.
Other people
Yeah.
might like
Yeah.
this. Yeah. That's very cool. So besides like Wheel of Time and Dresden Files, is there anything else you guys are reading right now, or is there any other books that are like major favorites of your guys's?
Oh, we're trying to pile through things as fast as we can. There's so much good content out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a fantasy reader since, I was a kid, but there was a good chunk of time where I just got focused on work and I wasn't reading as much. And the fantasy genre exploded during that time. So I've been really working hard to catch up this year. Right now, I'm reading the Magician's trilogy. That's something Zach has already read. And so he said, Dad, you got to read this. And we kind of go back and forth like that. I point him at things. So I've been telling him, Dresden Files, dude, you got to start the Dresden Files. Things like that. I made it through the first trilogy of the First Law series, Joe Abercrombie this year. That was fantastic. The Broken Earth trilogy, amazing. I don't know if you guys have read that one yet.
I've been wanting to try it.
Yeah,
is it pretty good?
Its style is kind of different from a lot of other things that are out there. I loved it. It was good. I found the first book a little hard to get through at times, but I powered through. Most people think the first book's the best of the series. I didn't. I like the rest of it better. That's reading. Reading is so subjective. So there's very little out there that I haven't enjoyed. And I'm a completist, so once I start something, I kind of need to finish. So that includes this year, I finished 2 series that are both over 30 plus books. The Shannara Chronicles. I shouldn't say it that way because that reminds me of that sucky TV series, which we will not talk about anymore. But the Shannara stories, which was 33 books, and the Rift War Chronicle cycle by Raymond Feist. Again, these lasted decades, and I've read them all. So that's been fun.
Have you, I'm wondering if you like big series like that, have you ever read any of the Dragonlance books?
Oh, yes. I've read most of them.
Really?
Going way back to when they were first being published, because I'm an old guy, so I remember when these things were coming out. I was playing D&D and, now there's a book series. Yeah. Love those.
That's awesome. I've been trying to get into those. Every time I go to the used bookstore, I'm looking for that first book in the first the Dragon's Chronicles.
Twilight.
Yes.
Yep.
And I look for that every single time and I can never find it. But I'm like, if I can find it at a used bookstore at some point, I will definitely read it. And
see, you got to get down here by me.
Powell's. Really?
Come to Powell's.
That's right. I've been there.
There you go. They have everything. For those of you listening, downtown Portland, Oregon, we're talking about Powell's, man. Best used bookstore in the world.
Oh, man, that's right. I went in there once. I've only been there once. And it is huge. It is like massive.
So many floors. I don't even remember how many floors of books. And
I think there's like
you can get
4.
lost.
Yeah.
4 or 5. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I should make a trip down there. That would be so awesome. But I did the same thing with Eye of the World. I put off Wheel of Time for so long, and with the show coming out, I was like, I'm probably not gonna read them. And then I decided if I can find Eye of the World at a used bookstore, then I'll buy it and I'll read it. I'm not going to make it a priority, but if I happen to see it, I will buy it. And sure enough, I found my copy at Half Price Books, and I started with the physical copy, and I got to like right before the Trolloc attack happens. And I was hooked. I was like, this little town is so charming. And I'm just like, this is awesome. And so then I read up to there over a weekend, and then on Monday I had to go to work, and I was like, well, I have to know what happens, so I got the audiobook and just listened to it all day at work.
Well, I'm like, you were to that point and you were hooked. And
Yeah.
then you get to Winter Night.
Oh
Holy
yeah.
crap, then.
Yes,
That's where it really
absolutely.
takes off. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the reason why that beginning just hooked me so much is like I can understand how some people would think that it maybe feels slow, but I did not feel like it was slow at all. I felt like we were getting to know these characters in like the day, like a kind of a day in the life of these characters, and they're getting
Mm-hmm.
ready for this
Mm-hmm.
festival, and they're excited for the fireworks and the Glee Man. And then Moraine comes in, and how they meet Moraine, and she's just like outside talking to them like a normal person, even though she's like this
The
crazy
Lady
mage, basically.
Moraine.
Yeah. And so I just love that. I it totally hooked me. And like the scene where Rand and Matt are unloading the brandy, and just the conversations they're having as they go up
Yeah.
and down and up and down, grabbing all this brandy. And
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. It absolutely hooked me from there. And then of course, like you said, Winter Night happens, and Rand is dragging his dad through the woods, and it's so
Yeah.
heartbreaking. And
Well, Robert
um,
Jordan does a couple of things really well. One of them is, I mean, he's character driven, the stories he
yes.
writes. So that's what you were feeling. You were getting sucked into those characters already.
Yeah.
But he also has done an amazing job of world building, but
Right.
he does it through the characters. So
Yeah.
he's masterful at that. My wife, because there was this TV show coming out, like you said, I finally got her to give it a try, to
Mm,
read the series. I've been mentioning it for years.
yeah.
Well, she's now on book 4, because
Oh,
she got sucked into it. And the kinds of things about fantasy that I love, she doesn't always, but it's the characters that have her too. He does such a
okay.
good job of creating engaging characters you care about and you want to know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Ben from Literature and Lo-Fi was telling me, it was like right before I started the series, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what can I expect with this series? And he's like, it's very character driven. And he said, he's like, it's more character driven than it is plot driven. And
Yes.
I didn't really know what that meant, because I was like, well, what's a series without the plot? But as soon as
Well,
I
there's a
started
plot.
reading, yeah, there
There's a
is
plot.
definitely. Oh yeah, there definitely is. But as soon as I started reading it, I knew exactly what he was talking about,
Yeah.
because I care way more about the characters and what's going to happen to them than I do so far with the story. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy the story, but the level that the characters are at for me is just so high that it goes way above anything that's happening plot wise.
Which speaks a lot to why Wheel of Time has such a rabid fan base. I
Yes.
mean, they are strongly spoken. And I love being part of that fan base. But you spend some time on Twitter, the Twitter of Time community, they are passionate. They love these characters.
Yeah.
Facebook, they're a little scarier on Facebook. There's fans there too, but don't talk to them about
I
the TV show right now. Facebook's not a friendly place.
I've literally not been on Facebook for at least a year and a half, and I'm pretty sure that it's just like a Mad Max wasteland over there. Just
That's
Facebook,
pretty
just
accurate. Yeah.
Facebook in general. I'm like, does anybody use Facebook still? Like, is everybody just on Twitter now, and Facebook is just this deserted wasteland?
We still share our episodes out there, make announcements on Facebook, but mostly so people will learn about things like Twitter and come to
Yeah.
a safer place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Uh,
awesome. Well, with that said, let's just give our spoiler warning real quick, and we can go even further with some of these things that we have been discussing the past couple minutes. If you have not read the Dragon Reborn, this is a full spoiler kind of, I guess, mini deep dive into the book. So if you haven't read it, I would definitely recommend pausing this, going and reading it or listening to it, and then coming back and checking this out when you're done. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1, you've been warned.
So you mentioned spoilers, no spoilers, for beyond
future books. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to point out. So
and that,
yeah,
that jives well, like I said, with our podcast too. So I'm glad to be here. We're working on the Dragon Reborn right now too. We're almost done with it on our podcast, chunk by chunk, really working through it, but we don't spoil what's to come. So
right. That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, being a first time reader. I literally just finished reading this book, I think maybe 2 weeks ago. And then we did a couple other books, and then we did Jade Legacy, which we just filmed last night. And I finished that book on, what's today? I finished that book on Monday. So the past 2 days, I've been rereading the Dragon Reborn. So you might have to, I'm almost back to I'm like at the 75% mark. So you might have to remind me on a couple things when we get closer to some of the events that happen at the end of the book. But otherwise, I feel like I remember most of it.
I have read this book at least 6 times. Might be 7, might be 8. It gets a little hazy after you've done so many rereads, but I've said that before off air, but I'll say it again. Is once you finish this series, you will definitely have to reread it. It is far richer the second time through. And then you still learn more things the third and the fourth, deeper appreciation, because it's a great story, the whole series the first time through. Yeah. But you don't even realize what you're not noticing the first time. Oh, yeah.
I have some questions about this prologue. But first, Jim, do you want to make some people angry, and we can talk about the show a little bit? Or maybe not angry?
Wow. The fans are really polarized on the show.
Yeah.
And it's been weird to watch. The best way to describe the TV show is it's another turning of the wheel. I didn't coin that, but people just saying, hey, it's another telling of this story. It's not trying to be the books. It's trying to be true to the essence of the books. And I have found that to be very true so far. Yeah. They've definitely made some huge changes, but the core of where the story's going is true. It's still, I recognize what's happening.
Right.
But for someone like me who's read the book so many times, I can't be 100% sure what's going to happen next when I watch the TV series. So that's kind of fun too,
So yeah, that is a really cool thing that I've heard people mention. They're like, well, since they're doing things a little bit differently, like it's like a new Wheel of Time for me.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's cool in some ways. So I actually had to stop watching the show after the last episode. I was like, I'm just gonna stop for a while, and I'm going to read the books because I'm really enjoying the books, and the TV show is making me really mad.
What got you? What was that thing that was, nope, that's one too many? What was it?
It was just such a cumulative, because I wasn't even going to watch episode 5. It was really, it really hit me early at like episode 3, where all the changes with Tom and just kind of like how like this random like Dana chick and this random dark friend and just all this stuff. And I kind of don't understand. So let me start with this. You mentioned that it's a retelling, a new turning of the wheel. And I think that would be absolutely fantastic if they had been very clear from the first trailer and said a retelling of the Wheel of Time or a new turning of the wheel, because that's what Lord of the Rings is doing right now. They're making there's an Amazon show, and it's nothing that was in the books. I think that could have really just kind of watered down the situation and put so many people at ease if they had just been like, hey, we don't want to retell the books. We want to make this story accessible for modern audiences. And, you know, we want to tell it in a different way. So this is going to be a retelling or a based on the world of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, something like that. I think that could have done so much damage control.
There's a couple of extra things going on there. You know, one is this is such a massive book series. I mean, 15 books, 14 regular, and then the prequel. So yeah, it's really not possible to do a straight from the page adaptation.
I agree.
You couldn't get that much onto a screen. So Definitely. They had to adapt in some way. That's one part of it. But you know, they made some intentional choices to freshen it up, to do some things that are different. Like, you know, right now, this is a full spoiler through the Dragon Reborn. So we know Rand Thor is the Dragon Reborn. Okay, right. We know this. Yeah. But in the TV series, they're kind of trying to keep that murky. Is it Nynaeve? Is it Matt? Is it, you know, they're trying to, which is very funny to someone like me.
That is kind of cool, yeah.
Exactly.
I do like
for
that. For
someone who's not a book reader, that's engaging. That's interesting.
Right.
But the thing is, they have been very transparent from very early in the filming that this was going to be different. This was going to be a new thing. Just not everybody got that information.
Right.
You know, okay. I've been following the workings on the show since 2019. And so I wasn't surprised at all. They kind of did a good job of stealing me for this because I empathize for someone who is just a big fan of the books and then sees this crap on the TV screen. You know, I get that. I understand, but I knew it was coming. So I was ready for it. And so I can look at the things they changed and I go, all right, I wouldn't have done that. But I mean, Perrin has a wife. What the heck? You know, those sorts of things. But I was ready. So those who had no clue, hadn't seen any of the information. I mean, there were magazine articles. Rafe Judkins is the showrunner. He's very active on Twitter and Instagram. He was putting stuff out like this for the last 2 years.
Really?
But if you didn't catch any of this, then you don't know. And that really is the dividing line between, well, if you check out the reviews on IMDb, the people who had seen this stuff and knew what was coming are loving the show. And the ones who had no clue, they hate the show because you're destroying my books, you know?
Right.
And the only thing I can say to people like that is, well, you still always have the books.
Yes. And that's why, you know, I don't want to be like any like gatekeeping fan or anything where it's like the show is like completely ruining it. But it was kind of like, you know, I started reading these books because the show was coming out and I'm like, oh, well, it'll be fun to like see it'll be fun to read these scenes and then see it in the show. And I think what upsets me the most is that so far there really hasn't been any fully realized scene from the book. It's kind of been, you know, retelling and, you know, doing the same ideas, but in different ways. And I think the thing that irritated me so much about that was, I don't know if you've read the Expanse series.
I have not yet. It's on my TBR and not very far down. I'm excited for it because it just finished, you know, the Expanse. And we've got a fan on our Discord who's like, Jim, you've got to read the Expanse. I'm like, I know, I'm coming. It's coming.
You guys will love it. I can guarantee you guys will love it. But one thing that was really cool is I started reading the books and then my friend was like, oh, you know, they made a TV show. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I got to like book 5 or something. And then I checked out the TV show. And again, it's not 1-to-1, but it's very close. And they have like very specific scenes from the book. So like this isn't like a spoiler or anything, but one of the guys on the main crew, Amos, there's this scene that's kind of a joke to the book readers. It says that he's getting angry with somebody and he has this can of chicken in his hands, and it said that he drove the can of chicken into the guy's head like a piston. And so it's just this funny scene where it's like he beat the crap out of this guy with a can of chicken, right? And I'm watching the show, and it's getting close to that part, and I'm like, there's no way they're gonna do it. It was such a small little scene in the books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way they're gonna do it. There's no way they're gonna do it. And then it happens, and it was the most like joyous experience from me, because I'm like, they put the exact scene in there. And so when I heard that Amazon was doing Wheel of Time, they also did The Expanse. And so I'm like, oh, they're going to nail this.
Yeah.
And then when it turns out that like none of my favorite scenes from Eye of the World are in the show, I was just like,
well,
okay.
Let me throw a couple last things about the show in then to maybe help a little.
Sure.
One is, when they write a show like this, you know, you and I, we are the outsiders in today's culture. We read. There are a lot of people who just don't get into, I mean, especially a series like The Wheel of Time. It's too large, it's intimidating, and some even now look at, oh, it started in 1990, it's old, you know. And so Amazon's trying to create a series that will hook a whole bunch of people who have never read it and maybe never will read it. And so they're creating a series that can engage that audience. So that's one thing. But I would encourage you to watch the series again from the beginning, because since you have read the books, this TV series they've created is very much like the books. It's better the second time. It benefits from a rewatch. I've currently watched all the episodes that are out there twice. The first time, I just kind of absorbed it. Okay, great. And I wasn't always so hot in some things. And each one of these episodes, the second time through, I was like, oh, I had no idea the layers that were there, references to the books, things that, you know, I missed. I completely missed the first time, that are very satisfying to me as a book reader. So I think you'd notice that. I think you would. So I recommend, before you just say, I'm done, watch them a second time and you'll catch what I'm talking about.
I definitely will. And something that I was also thinking about too was, have you seen the Witcher show?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Which very much confused me at first, because I haven't read the books or played the video games.
Okay. So I've played the latest Witcher video game, but I didn't read the books. And I know that was another show where a lot of book fans were kind of divided on it. And they're like, oh, they changed, you know, a lot of things. But me, having never read the books, I loved it. Like I am so excited for season 2 of The Witcher.
Very well done. Yep.
And it's just like, man, it was like my favorite show at the time when it came out. And so that, I think I was literally like thinking about that today. And I was like, okay, so that makes sense why people are loving The Wheel of Time. And now I'm kind of like, well, should I have started the show first before I started the books?
Makes you wonder now, huh? Yeah. Now, The Witcher is really well done. Season 2 about to come out now. Looking forward to that.
We're just a few days away.
My co-host, my son, he played the video games. Yeah. And after watching the series, the first season, then he went and read the books. Okay. So that might be the better thing for some people with Wheel of Time. Watch the TV series first, then go read the books that inspired it, you know, and get a new story. But too late for you, Spencer. You're already stuck in the middle now. You know, just got to do what you got to do.
I'm already just jaded and angry. All right. Well, let's get into some of these book things, can you tell me a little bit about this prologue? Obviously, like, we don't need to talk about it for like 15-20 minutes or anything, but can you just give me like a brief overview of what was happening in this prologue? Because I'll be completely honest with you. I am not someone who ever skips a prologue, but I don't know. It was like the chapter for this prologue was like 55 minutes in the audiobook. And I got 20 minutes into it, and I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. I just want to see what's going on with Rand. And so I did skip this prologue.
Well,
So
I'll tell you,
just a brief idea of what is happening.
The prologue, and get used to this.
Yeah.
The prologue is a piece that Robert Jordan uses throughout the books to kind of add in layers of other stuff that's important to the story before he then moves back into the core story.
Right.
Now, the next book that you'll move into, The Shadow Rising, is the only book that doesn't have a prologue, interestingly. The rest of them have significant prologues. They get bigger and bigger. Some of them turn into novellas, practically, I'm telling you. But in this one, you're jumping into and getting a little more depth on the Children of the Light, the White Cloaks, and you meet their Lord Captain Commander, Pedro Nile. And what it's tying together are some pieces of what had been happening at the latter part of the Great Hunt. What was going on? There was that weird stuff happening out there with White Cloaks doing some shady things out there. You had Jeffrem Bornhold, who's known as the one good White Cloak, the one who actually had integrity and morals in the Great Hunt. Yeah. And then you had Jacob Carradine, these other characters who were doing stuff like, pretending to not be White Cloaks and slaughtering whole villages. And what's going on? That was weird stuff. So this is trying to explain what's going on. What is all that about?
Okay.
So we meet Pedro Nile. He's one of the great captains. So there's 5 great captains. We don't get a lot of history on why they're the great captains, but they are military geniuses. Okay, that's been proven in years past. And he's the leader of this group, and he's, trying to piece together what happened out there at Falme. What was that? What's going on? And he's got message from Child Bayar. Now, if you want to hate a White Cloak, hate Child Bayar. The man is a dipstick. And he comes and he gives his version of what happened out there, which is not the version we know. It's his skewed version. And Niall, he listens to Bayar and he gets, that's a skewed version. Niall is not an idiot. You don't become the leader of a whole organization by being an idiot. But then he gets to talk to Jacob Carradine, another one of the White Cloak leaders, who had orders to do certain things out there on Almouth Plain and Falme and screwed the pooch. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. Things didn't get done right. And he reads them up one side and the other. And it's very uncomfortable for him. And he's just like trying to cover his butt. And what he answers to Niall, and Niall's not having any of it. And he's given orders to go do more things. And okay, fine. But we get 2 extra key pieces in this prologue that's probably the most important parts of it.
Okay.
One is that after Pedro Nile is done with Carradine, Mordeith shows up. Now, Mordeith has become a new secret advisor for the leader of the Children of the Light, but it's someone we already know. It's someone that my first time reading through the series, I did not catch how important he was. So I don't know if you've caught it yet.
That was the guy in the when Matt gets the dagger, right? Yeah.
No. Yes and no. Yes and no. Okay, this is complicated.
Okay.
But there's enough clues here so I can tell you who he is, and it's not a spoiler. You just might not have caught it the first time. You definitely catch it the second time.
Okay.
Mordeith is Padden Fane, the
Oh,
peddler from the beginning of the Eye of the World, who then followed them all the way through the series. He was there at the end as well, in Faldara, and then he steals the dagger. And that's the whole deal during the Great Hunt. They're trying to catch Padan Fane and the dagger.
okay.
Well, when he followed them in the Eye of the World, he did a stop at Shadar Logoth,
Okay.
and Mordeth, who you were thinking of, Shadar Logoth, infected Padan Fane.
Oh,
So Padan Fane is not the Padan Fane we meet at the beginning of the story. He's now something different.
oh, so Padan Fane in the beginning of Eye of the World, he actually was just a normal guy, and then he gets
Well,
infected.
he was already something a little messed up because he was a dark friend,
Oh, okay.
but he was a dark friend that had been taken up to, and we learned this at the end of the Eye of the World, so I'm not spoiling this. He was taken up to Shaiol Ghul, where the Dark One did stuff to him to turn
Okay.
him into the Dark One's hound, so he could chase down basically Rand al'Thor, though the Dark One didn't know which one was the one he's looking for. But so Padan Fane had an ability to sense out who is going to be the new Dragon Reborn. And so he was sent out there. He's chasing them. That's why he chased them all the way into Shadar Logoth. But then Mordeth gets a hold of him there. And something wacko happens. Usually someone gets touched by the shadow of Shadar Logoth. Something happens, like happened to Matt.
Okay.
But Padan Fane was already a twisted, different sort of individual, so it had a different effect.
Okay.
And so he's got some Mordeth with him. But then you add the extra layer that he followed them in the Eye of the World through the ways. Now, you remember the ways and
Yeah.
that black wind, okay, Makin
Yes.
Shin.
Yeah.
That did something to him as well. So this dude
Okay.
has been messed up and screwed sideways multiple times, and he's come out some new, improved, stronger version of evil.
Okay.
He's not really working for the Dark One. He's working for Padan Fane / Mordeth now, he's calling himself. When
Okay.
we already saw in the Great Hunt, when he was in Falme, that he was kind of working for himself a little bit, trying to get the dagger and whatnot. Well, now we see a new version where
Okay.
he's just trying to do bad things and advance himself. So he's insinuated himself into the inner circle of the White Cloaks. And he's already starting to have some influence on Pedron Nile. That's what we're seeing here, which plays into his Mordeth character, because Shadar Logoth, Moraine tells the story of Eridhal that becomes Shadar Logoth because of this advisor who showed up named Mordeth, who twisted their leadership into getting all nasty and going completely corrupt. So that's part of Padan Fane. That's what he's now doing to Pedron Nile. That's what we're starting to see in the prologue.
Okay.
But the second big significant thing is then Jacob Carradine, after he got read the Riot Act, goes back to his tent and he runs into a Fade. So Jacob Carradine is a dark friend. One of the White Cloaks is a dark friend working for the bad guy.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's what we learn in the prologue, in that he's under orders to be doing things. And before, he was under orders to find and kill the Dragon Reborn, but now he has new orders. And that's what we get in the prologue, that he's supposed to find and make sure the Dragon Reborn is safe, is not stopped. What? Yeah.
Oh.
It's crazy, but that's what we learn in the prologue.
Okay. Interesting. Good to know. And speaking of speaking of bad guys, something that I have found super funny throughout these 3 books is it seems like there's a bit of a pattern to these first 3 books. I don't know if it like changes, but the book opens up and there's a Trolloc attack, and then all of our heroes get split up and they all go their own way, and then they all come together, and then Rand fights Balsamon. And so I'm curious, if does that pattern kind of change? Because I don't know if this is true, but what I've heard is the first 3 books were going to be their own trilogy. And then he decided to do the rest of the series. So does it kind of change from here as far as like this kind of outline or pattern that we're seeing in these books?
Yes, it changes.
Okay.
You know, the history with Robert Jordan, you're right. Originally, he put this first book together hoping it could be a trilogy, because thank you, J.R.R. Tolkien, that was established as a trilogy.
Yeah.
But it got so successful that before he was starting to write the 3rd book, they already wanted more books. So then it was going to be 6 books. And then before he gets even starting the 6th book, they're like, we'll just keep writing checks, dude. Whatever. Just go ahead. Okay. This is selling. We're good. And because of that, when you get into 7, 8, 9, maybe 10, some people describe those books as the slog. Now, you will not experience the slog. The slog existed for those of us like me who were reading them when they were published. Because you read a book and it stops there and you're like, what? That's all? Now I got to wait another year or so for more. That's not enough. So it was too slow moving through. But because you have the luxury of just going from book to book to book to book, you will not feel the slog the way people did. You may not even think of it as a slog at all.
So that's kind of what Ben from Literature and Lo-Fi said, is that he didn't really feel the slog. So it's not so much that it's slow and boring. It's just that the way they end, they're like their own kind of chunk of the story. Yeah. And they all kind of have to go together, and for them to be split up,
that's it.
Just kind of sucks.
Each one of these first 3 books is a very self-contained story of its own.
Yeah.
And it's a nice, well-rounded tale. Book 4, the world opens up. And when book 4 ends, it's not, I mean, each of these books has an ending of a sort. There's something that happens, but it's not to the same degree, not so clean and neat and wrapped up with a bow like the first 3 books. Okay. So, you've seen them all scatter and all come together. Yeah, let that go. That's not going to continue to happen in every book anymore. It's going to change.
Okay, cool. So speaking of Robert Jordan, kind of the way that he was writing these books, it looks like you can give me some info on Robert Jordan, because I really don't know a whole lot about him, just besides what's at the end of the audiobooks. He has like a little interview at the end.
Yep, I've listened to that. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, otherwise I don't know a lot about him. I've talked about Michael Kramer and Kate Redding a little bit. I definitely prefer Michael Kramer. I think it's a little bit jarring when it's like right in the middle of a chapter and it goes to Kate Redding. And my other complaint with her was that all of her characters kind of sound the same to me. And so it's hard for me to like tell who's talking, but otherwise I love the audiobooks. I could not imagine the characters' voices any other way now.
Michael Kramer does a really nice loyal. I enjoy the loyal voice.
And
yes.
The guy from the show had to have been pulling from Kramer. Like
he channeled that pretty well, which is good, because in the show it doesn't quite look like wanted to see. that might have been. They're on the record. Rafe Judkins, again, the showrunner, said, we decided we needed to do a Loyal that was more not CGI, because it'd be too expensive and we want him to be there all the time. So they came up with a way, but wow, the performance is spot on. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, Robert Jordan was a Vietnam War vet who came home and got into his intended career of writing. Now, he did other things. He's a trained physicist, but he took his background with physics and his experience as a war veteran and channeled it into creating new worlds, fantasy worlds. The Wheel of Time was not the first thing he tried to write, but it's what he spent the rest of his career writing once he started it. So, the first book came out in 1990, and then over the next 20 plus years, he puts out just such a series of books. He put, the first few, he just pumped them out. One after another, bam, bam, bam. Then he got to a point where the plots were getting so broad, it was taking a little longer to think these things through. And he was, if you understand his background, you understand his writing on the battles. If you picture, a Vietnam vet, he was a chopper gunner. So he was the one up there with his big ass gun, just chewing through people. And it's like, you could picture some of the things he will write later on. You haven't seen much of that yet, but it channels into the way he describes battle, as well as the impact it has on people. And you're going to see more of that as we go through the series. He really was able to draw from his experiences. Plus, his physics background has something to do with the way he describes magic, the way he works through the processes of how things work, and the way we think of different worlds, like you learned in The Great Hunt with the portal stones and different realities. He's kind of drawing from some of these scientific possibilities that he's learned about. But, I found the series in 1995. So it was just the first few books were out, and then I'm reading every book as it comes out. But they get so deep and so many plots that I got to a point where I think it was book 7 came out, and I started to read it, and then there were too many holes. I didn't remember enough. So that was my first reread. And reread from the beginning and then read it. And it was so good. But then you get eventually after book 10, then he did a prequel, and I was ticked. Book 10 is not the strongest book. It's important. It's fine. But it's not the strongest of the books. Some think it's the weakest of the books. And then he follows it up with a prequel. We're like, what? No, advance the friggin' story. Come on. Prequel's fine. I don't want to throw shade on the prequel. But then he finally comes out with book 11, which is excellent. Knife of Dreams. And then he dies. We're like, what the heck? We are so invested in this series. But this is Robert Jordan as an author. By this point, he cared about his fans so much that he's on his deathbed. He's in the hospital, and he is reciting, he's dictating into a recorder things that someone needs to know to finish the series.
Wow.
And he had tons of notes. For everything in the books, double it. You've got that many more notes on things that he'd already done. And you add one extra layer in that his editor was his wife. So she's with him in the hospital as he's just reciting things. Here's stuff you need to know. Parts of the last 3 books were still written by him, even though they're published posthumously. Because then she got Brandon Sanderson and said, here's all this stuff. We think you can do it. So that's RJ. Amazing.
So how did, obviously no spoilers, but how did Brandon Sanderson do with the last 3? Does it still feel like Robert Jordan, or? It
does. There's a little bit of a difference in that, Brandon Sanderson, I'd say he does action just a little better than Robert Jordan, which is probably good for the big finish. But he's also very good with characters. He was a huge, massive geek nerd fan of Wheel of Time coming into this. So he loved these from childhood, so he was not going to mistreat it. I've listened to interviews on that where he literally said when Harriet asked him, would you do this now? He was terrified. What if I
Yeah.
screw it up? But then he was like, but if I say no, someone else might screw it up. And then I'm going to feel
Right.
bad for that. So at least I love this stuff. I will do my darndest to be faithful to it. So when you read it, there is not a jarring shift. It still feels like the Wheel of Time. It's still very true. There's two things that people comment on a lot that I agree with. One is that no, I don't want to spoil. So there's
Okay.
one key character. I won't name the character, but one of the core characters seems to regress a little bit.
Okay.
Because all characters grow, they progress in any good story. And there's one that when you start book 12, it's like, wait a second, you were past this. Why are you like that now?
Yeah.
And the character growth we'd seen over a number of books happens again over book 12 and 13. And then by the time you get to book 14, okay, that's the character we know and love again. We got it. Okay. So that was a little weird. But the other is that there's a character introduced in book 12, brand new, that is completely Brandon Sanderson's character, who you end up loving. That you can find interviews. Harriet's admitted it. This was something that Brandon Sanderson was like, I want to add this extra thing. It's not in the notes. It's nothing, but I think it would add. And she said, do it. It works. And it's great.
That's awesome.
I'll give you a name. It doesn't spoil. But when you hear the name Androl, that's a Brandon Sanderson creation. Okay,
awesome. Does he write romance better?
No, he does not. Because you got to stay true to the Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
If you want romance, you're reading the wrong series.
I know.
Goodness. In fact, he follows through on some last things that Robert Jordan put in place regarding romance. That's like, really? Are you kidding? But that's the way the notes were. So Brandon Sanderson saw it through.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm kind of known on the podcast between me, Gabe, and Chris. I'm the one who is like the most interested in fantasy romance. I really like romance storylines. And when I started reading these, I honestly, I don't think they're as bad as a lot of people give it
innocent
credit for.
Innocent.
They're all young. They're all trying to figure it out. But I think I might be the one person who really actually liked Fail and Perrin in this book.
I didn't have a problem with Perrin and Fail. The fan base, wow, there's some hard feelings there. Absolutely. Like, there are many people who pronounce Fail as just fail.
Yeah.
Fail, because it's spelled Faile, and they just go hard on fail.
Yeah.
But no, Fail. I like it. So you're not alone.
Right on. So before we go into a couple more of these notes, I did have this one question that you said you might be able to help me a little bit with. At the beginning of this book, all these women are coming to find Moraine in the mountains. Are we supposed to know yet why, like how they're able to do that, or how they know to come out there? Because like one lady said, I just got a feeling to come out here.
Mm-hmm. It's intentionally left a little vague. But we understand the impression that these are all part of her eyes and ears. Moraine has spent 20 years establishing a network of women who pay attention to what's happening around them and then report back to Moraine. And the fact that they feel a tug says that each of these women have some ability with the one power. So they're feeling a nudge. They're not Aes Sedai. But we've learned already back in the Great Hunt that anyone who has the ability to touch the one power should come to the White Tower and should train. But not all of them become Aes Sedai. Some just learn enough to not hurt anybody. and then they go
Right.
back out into the world. So my understanding is a bunch of these people are those kind. They're not Aes
Okay.
Sedai, but they are. If it was Star Wars, we'd say they're force sensitive. You know,
Okay.
they can touch the power, so they're feeling the sense through the power that they need to come here because there's a reason, and
Right.
Moraine's the reason. Yeah.
So she wouldn't be able to tug on anybody that wasn't force sensitive.
Nor do I think she's really doing something to tug. It's
Okay.
just it's what the wheel wants right now.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Which does tie into something else you talk about just a little later. I don't know if you want to jump to it at all yet, but talking about ta'veren.
Oh yeah, let's do it. I would love to.
I mean, ta'veren is Robert Jordan saying, yes, some characters I'm giving plot armor, and I'm just giving it a name. It's called ta'veren.
Yeah.
They will not die, and the world will wrap around them.
Yeah. Totally.
What a great invention.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are people in the lore of the world that the wheel spins out when it's needed to make sure certain things happen, and then the craziest things sometimes will happen around them. Yeah.
So I talked about this a little bit at the end of my Great Hunt video, but Arthur Hawkwing tells Huron, he's like, you know, the wheel might, like, you might be somebody that the wheel would be interested in turning back out. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, so from what I gather, is there not everybody gets reincarnated. It's like this select group of people that the wheel decides to turn out again, or no?
Nope. The lore of the world is everyone gets reincarnated.
Okay.
But certain people are of a different caliber.
Okay.
You know, so such as Rand.
Right.
He's a particular, and what I've seen in some theories on this is it's the soul of the person. They don't necessarily use that word a lot, but the core, the soul of the person is the one that gets spun out again and again. And certain souls are a certain level above. So whenever they're spun back out, they have a greater impact than others do. There's not a sense of like karma, you know, the idea of if you lead a good life, you'll come out better next time. And if you lead a sucky life, you come out as a cockroach. It's not like that in the Wheel of Time. It's the ones that tend to be more true and good come out true and good again in different ways. Right. And the putzes are still putzes, but they keep coming out.
You know what was interesting about that, though? At the end of the Great Hunt, Arthur says to Rand, he's like, there's been many times that we have fought on the same side, and then there's been just as many times that we fought against each other.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I was like, that is super interesting. Like, they're like, I don't know what that means exactly, but it seems like they may have different purposes each time they get kind of reincarnated.
And it's part of what Robert Jordan does with this creation, this world he's built. You get left to speculate on a lot of things like that. But, you know, I look at that and I go, there are some great people who are on the wrong side of things at times. Just because of the scenario they're in where they think they're right. I mean, you've probably heard the cliche, the line, everyone is the hero of their own story. Yeah. You know, so bad guys typically aren't there going, I suck and I'm going to suck to the best of my ability. No, they think they're awesome and they think they're right. And sometimes I'd say in the Wheel of Time, you've got spectacular people who are on the wrong side of the battle, but they're being spectacular in that role. And that's what they were spun out to be this time.
Okay. Well, I want to hop back just a step because you made a really good point in this number 3 storytelling note, and you brought up the fact that this series has unreliable narrators, which is one of my favorite things in fantasy. The Dresden Files does this with Harry. Like Harry is a very unreliable narrator. King Killer Chronicles does this with Quoth. He's basically like telling one big lie. So he's like a very unreliable narrator. I love these series that do this because then you get other perspectives and it's up to you to put the puzzle pieces together and kind of find out where the truth is in the middle. And I think the place that I noticed this the most was in the prophecy in Eye of the World. The Two Rivers has very different ideas of how the world works than Camelin does. Matter of fact, Two Rivers didn't even know that they were under the Queen's rule.
We're in Andor? What?
Yeah. Yeah. And and then as you start hearing how all these other people define the prophecy, it gets a little bit different. And then I think in this book, we get it a little bit with the Aiel. They kind of have their own version of the prophecy. So definitely. I just wanted to bring up that is such a really good storytelling device.
Yes. And it only gets better. It only gets better because you're getting the points of view from only a few particular key characters right now. But as the series goes, there's more and more character point of views that you're going to get. So the picture expands and becomes more complex. And you as a reader get a better and better understanding of what's going on, but yet you still never get the omniscient perspective, which it's just wonderful.
Okay. And another way, the boys, they're always like, oh, Rand is so good with girls and Perrin is so good with girls.
I wish Matt was here. He'd know what to do. Yes. So funny. Running jokes all the way through the series.
All right. So what do you think about some of the world building in this book? Like what are some of the things that we get introduced to in this book that expand both the world building and the lore?
Yeah. Well, we get to, in this book, see Ilian. We get to see Tyr. We're getting to see that Jordan has created different locations that are so unique, have such specific characteristics, different ways of talk, which you heard, as listening in the audiobook. Ilian, it's the land of pirates, I do be talking to you now, it's just funny, but he's consistent in the way he does some of these things. And that's going to open up even more as we go through the series, but you get a nice taste for it. I think the biggest world building thing that I value in the Dragon Reborn is the significant introduction of the Aiel.
Yes.
We see in multiple layers the Aiel. We've got the girls meeting Avienda and Ruark and that group over there. And then we've got, of course, Perrin meeting Gaul, the man in the cage, and freeing him. And then, Tyr. Come on, and learning that they are the people of the dragon. There's some cool stuff here with the Aiel, and it shouldn't be a shock when I point out they will be significant through the entire rest of the series. So definitely. The world opens up tremendously with the introduction of the Aiel. We've heard about them from book 1, but they were the bad guys.
Yeah.
The Aiel War. All we heard about was sketchy, scary stuff.
That's right.
We had a brief meeting with Aiel in Cairhien in the Great Hunt.
Yes.
When Perrin meets up, Perrin and the group that traveling with him, bunch of people from Faldara, Shannara. And they run into him just before they get to Cairhien, and it's just a little interaction. It's barely anything, but that interaction already gave us hints that, okay, the things we've been hearing about the IEO might be unreliable narrator. There might be more going on here. And finally, in the Dragon Reborn, it's like tremendously. There's a lot more here, and it makes the story a lot richer. And you have no idea, to be honest, how much richer till you read the next book.
Nice. Yeah, I'm so excited for the fourth book. I didn't want to go on to it until we did this episode, and I was reading Jade Legacy, but I have just been, especially seeing the show, and then I'm like, I just want to read the books, and I am so excited to go on with this series and go to book number 4. I don't know what to expect at all. And it's been a long time since I felt this way about a series where, nothing has really been spoiled for me. I knew that Rand was the dragon before I started the series because that's what everybody talks about. We also get some hints in this book that he might have several love interests. Which I think not the people involved, but I've been kind of spoiled to the idea of what happens with that. But that's really it. Like otherwise, I have no idea where this series is going, and I'm so excited. Yeah. So speaking of the Aiel, we also learned that they view the war very differently than how other people do or how other people think they do. Right. They see it as more of like, because they're not like broken over it, like they're not upset, and they see it more as like an execution, like it was like a necessary execution that had to happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. They had given a great gift to the people of Cairhien, and the Cairhien king pretty much spit on it.
Yeah.
And so this was punishment. This was simply righting a wrong. And the Aiel, they live by a very clear code. We've gotten that already. Inklings of that becomes much clearer in book 4. But they live by a code of what is right and what is wrong, and honor. And he had no honor. So they needed to come and fix that. And once they did, okay, peace out. We're gone. Huh. Yeah, that's why the war ended. So the people in the Westlands here, where Rand has grown up, think we beat the Aiel. No, you didn't. They were done. They went home. That's all.
Yeah.
It's a very different perspective. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's very cool. And then we also learned that they are like, I don't know if they're like scared of the Aes Sedai, but they believe that they are in service to the Aes Sedai and that they had failed at the breaking of the world, right? They feel like they failed during that. And they're like, if Aes Sedai is to like throw lightning at me, like I'll like dodge and move away, but I'm not going to hurt the Aes Sedai. Right. I thought that was I was not expecting that when they said that. I was like, oh, wow. So like the Aes Sedai could literally do anything they want to the Aiel.
And we'll take it. We'll take it. We deserve it. We'll take it. And I can't tell you anything about that.
Okay.
I can't, other than to say, again, book 4 all becomes clear.
Okay, cool. So is book 4 your favorite, or is it one of your favorites?
It's definitely one of my favorites.
Okay.
There's 15 books. The Dragon Reborn is number 5.
Okay.
So it's in the top 5. But The Shadow Rising, it might be my second favorite.
Oh.
The favorite is A Memory of Light. The conclusion, just because it's the conclusion, after all those years. Yes. But I'd say The Shadow Rising is my second favorite. Okay. And then following right behind it is The Fires of Heaven and Lord of Chaos, the next 2 books. I mean, they're so good. And then you get to the Dragon Reborn. Yeah, so you're in for a ride these next few books.
Oh, I'm so excited. All right, I'll get us through this world building section real quick. The only other thing I wanted to note was we learned that there are multiple worlds or multiple planets, and that, or maybe I don't know, but
Multiple
realities. Okay, and if the Dark One is unleashed on one of them, he is unleashed on all of them. So are these, we've seen a lot of these like alternate timelines, alternate realities, like when Rand kind of does his fast travel in the second book, and he uses that thing, and he lives like dozens of lives.
We call it the flicker scene, because that's what's said again. Flicker. Yeah.
And so are we going to see a lot more of that? And are we going to see like, are these alternate realities and alternate dimensions going to play a bigger part in the story besides just being cool scenes?
Not really.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
What we do understand is the things that, because it wasn't just Rand who experienced all those different realities and lives. It was the whole group with him. Those impact the people that were there. And so there are lasting impacts on how they will act moving forward in the series. But we don't see things about those other worlds. No, that's kind of Robert Jordan lets that go.
Okay. Well, you know what? While I have you here, I should ask you, because this is something that I was kind of confused on from The Great Hunt. Rand, there's a point where Rand walks into this house. And
the
he sees, yes, what was that?
That we understand was a trap. That was something Paddon Fane left for him so that he'd walk in and get stuck in this basically Groundhog's Day. It's a time loop trap that he's just stuck in, getting worse and worse and worse, and in essence could have died just being in that forever.
Wow.
And because Rand is who Rand is, both Ta'Veren and the Dragon Reborn, he was able to break out of it. But a typical person would not have been able to. That would have been Endgame. Yeah.
That is crazy. I have to go back and reread that now that I know that. That is awesome.
Yeah. It's a scary thing, man. Oh, creepy.
That would be nuts. And each time there was just more and more flies.
Yes.
And so you would think eventually the whole room would just be filled with flies. And oh my God, that would be awful.
Yeah.
All right. I just have a couple things I want to mention from the some of the new magic that we see in this book, and then we can bounce right on over to probably what we really want to talk about, which is some of these character moments and favorite moments from the book. But I just wanted to mention that we see Balefire for the first time, or at least the first time that it's named in this book. And we see Nynaeve uses it. I'm pretty sure Rand uses it, even though it doesn't say specifically.
You're right.
And I'm pretty sure Moraine uses it.
Totally.
And
Twice.
And I just loved how this Balefire is described, because I think the exact quote was, "Whatever fell into the light simply was not anymore." And I'm just like, oh, that is so cool.
And yet it's forbidden.
Right, yeah. I don't think I caught that it was forbidden.
Oh yeah, Moraine, after she uses it outside of Ilion, she explains that this is forbidden, and just for knowing it, she could possibly be stilled.
Oh, wow.
So that's something you're supposed to ponder on. Why?
Okay.
Why is it forbidden? Because dang, it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Why is it forbidden? That's something I'll go forward asking myself for sure.
Good. Perfect.
But also we see Rand's, so he gets two swords in this book. One is his he doesn't have his heron marked blade anymore, but he has some steel sword that he's setting on fire at when he's doing his whole Anakin Skywalker impression.
I like to call it his lightsaber.
Yeah.
But it's not a steel sword at all. It's purely made from the one power.
Oh, I thought he had a sword that he was setting on fire. Okay.
No, he's just going poof. Check this out, baby. Woo! Yeah, that's pure power.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Never goes dull.
Never goes dull, and it sure kicks ass. So, yeah. and then at the end of this, he gets Kalendor. He does the sword in the stone impression, and pulls Kalendor free.
Maybe he's some kind of king. He pulled a sword out of the stone. A little on the nose there. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see what Kalendor can do. We see him use it at the end there with Balsamon, right? Mm-hmm. But you know, something that has been catching my attention is they say it's a sword that's not a sword. And It's like, okay, unless it's something that's already been said, I'm kind of like, okay, well, what else is it then?
Yeah, it's not been said. You're going to get more information in the books to come.
Okay. My guess, and don't tell me if this is right or not, but my guess is that it is going to be like it is going to allow him to use the one power and not go mad. That's my guess. And I think it might be because they've mentioned that, and I know there's two kinds, and I don't know what kind it would be, but the Sa Angreal, and then there's another name for something similar.
There's three names you're thinking of. There's an Angreal, there's a Sa Angreal, and there's a Terangreal.
Okay.
Okay. The Angreal are the basic tools that allow you to channel more power than normal safely.
Yeah.
A Sa Angreal is basically an overpowered Angreal. So you can do way more otherwise. A Terangreal is a device that does things with the one power, but sometimes you need to be an Aes Sedai and channel into it. Sometimes it just does its thing. It's like a TV. You don't need a power. It does its thing. So Terangreals are a little different, but Angreal and Sa Angreal are really what you're thinking of. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know which one it would be, but my guess is it would be like one of those three. And I'm at this point in the story, I think something I'm the most interested in is when I was reading Eye of the World, for some reason, I was under the impression that the Dragon Reborn is the man who can use magic and not go mad. But then it looks like the dragon can absolutely go mad. And so I'm at this point, I'm wondering after Rand's whole exploits in this book, I'm like, he's already going crazy. Like how is he? So
what have you seen? What signs are there that Rand's going crazy already?
I mean, he killed that entire caravan.
Was that an act of a crazy man?
I think so.
I certainly thought so the first time I read it.
Okay.
But there's a little more to that than
I mean, unless
first time through.
Unless they're all dark friends, unless they were really like bad people undercover. I don't know. It says that originally there was 10 of them, and then when he had them all dead, there was 11. So I'm wondering if one of them was like not who. I don't know. I don't know how to put that theory together.
You're on the right point. There were 11 people.
Okay.
When all is said is done, there'd only been 10 that he'd seen. Now there's an 11th. The 11th is not dressed in
Right.
armor. It's just this plain, innocent person holding a dagger.
And he
Does that
says you
sound like
chose the wrong company.
Does that sound like anything else you've heard elsewhere in the series up to this point? A person dressed in plain attire that you don't notice, but has a dagger, so clearly means harm to you.
The lady that when Rand and Matt were traveling and she was the dark friend and she pulled a dagger on him, but she was dressed like a lady.
But Matt saw her. Matt knew she was there. But she was sketch. Okay, she was a dark friend, absolutely. But think about other times where people. Okay, I'll prod you just in the right direction. A couple more spots here. I'm gonna take you back to the Great Hunt.
Okay.
When Nynaeve and Egwene are walking through the tower and a crossbow bolt comes shooting out at them. You remember? And then
they're
Nynaeve captures a person in air, and then that person gets killed and stuff. But that person is called a gray man at that point.
Yeah, that happened in this book, didn't it? Or was it in the last one?
With 6 gray men that attacked Perrin.
Right. Okay, yeah.
That's right. And they didn't see any of them coming until Perrin, with his special nose, notices something. In the middle of the room, 6 people coming at them. They're all dressed normal. They all have daggers. They're all coming to kill. Gray men are a type of shadow spawn where they've given their soul to the Dark One. So you just don't notice them.
Wow. Okay.
So when you put those pieces together, you go, okay, there's this group, seems innocent, stopping at the fire. Can we share your fire? 10 people, and then Rand goes off and kills them all. There's 11. Wait a second.
Okay.
There was a gray man hiding right there, and Rand sensed it. And the fact that he killed them all, it might be slightly insane, or it might be he had some way of sensing they were bringing in the gray man with them, that they were dark friends.
Okay, very, very interesting.
Totally didn't catch that the first time I read it. Caught it the second time.
Definitely. Okay, very cool. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I just feel like
he's gotten all dark and broody.
Yeah, I mean, because he's off on his own and he's having these dreams, and certainly, or I don't know if they're dreams to him, but they're other people's dreams and they're seeing him. And like he thinks Egwene visits him in the dream and he's like, get back, like stay away from me. And so it was stuff like that where I was like, man, he must be going a little mad or something.
Seems unbalanced, at least. Yeah. No, there's evidence.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just interested to see how all of that kind of comes together, because and the other thing is, one thing that I think is really cool about the male side of the power is there's no one to teach it. There's no, you can't, the Aes Sedai have Tar Valon and they can go there and learn, but there are no male channelers that have really figured it out to where they're not going to go mad, or at least none that we've seen. And so I'm really interested to see how Rand isn't going to go crazy and how he's going to learn to control all this, because his power is beyond uncontrollable right now.
Yep.
I think that's one of the things I'm the most interested in as far as the magic goes. And
I will only tell you, you are going to get answers.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Is there anything you wanted to say about the magic system from this, or just the magic in this book at all, before we move on to characters?
Just that's one of the things in our podcast, Fantasy for the Ages, that we do take time to look at and really dig into the magic systems in a lot of different series. And the Wheel of Time is the first one we looked at way back in episode 18. We gave it a solid B, as in it's a strong magic system. He's devised something really well, but at times it seems to still follow the plot. Like,
Yeah.
I need this to happen. So now the magic makes that possible.
Right.
There's other series that's way more prevalent. I'll say Lord of the Rings is one of those. And I don't say that disparagingly. Tolkien didn't try to write a hard magic system. He just wrote magic into the world and it does what he wants it to do. And that's fine. The Wheel of Time's magic is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
So I was going to ask, so from what I've seen so far, I really can't tell if this does become a hard magic system or if it's a soft magic system. Where would you kind of rate it in between like a really like detailed magic system to kind of like a Harry Potter softer system?
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely more towards the detailed. It's a firm. It's not hard, it's firm.
Okay.
Yeah. And as you get more into it, you're going to get more of the pieces.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering, because I was like, it seems like the foundational like building blocks are there for us to get more information on how exactly these elements work together and how they're able to cast these spells and stuff. So that's good to know. What book does the magic system really start, where you really start learning more and more about it, would you say?
You've gotten some foundational pieces already, but again, book 4. Okay. It's amazing how much book 4 opens up this story, which is why it is the favorite for many people.
Okay, I'm so excited. All right, let's talk about some characters here. What were your favorite characters from this book, and what favorite character moments or character arcs throughout this book?
For me, hands down, Matt is the best character in this series, and partly because in the first 2 books Matt sucked. Yeah. And by design. He was tainted by the Shatter Logoth dagger, and it impacted his whole attitude and his perspectives and his paranoia and all sorts of stuff. We get to see the real Matt again, the Matt that was hinted at the beginning of The Eye of the World. And I love the Matt we get to meet. Not only just his attitude, his dialogue, the perspective he has on things, but also this freaking luck that he has that seems to just come through in some amazing ways. The gambling scene in Tar Valon, where he cannot do anything wrong, and even that moment where he has the battle on a bridge up above, with a gray man again, who they end up falling off, and by complete freak luck, Matt's fine. The guy's dead. Matt's fine. He's just such an entertaining character to me. Still an unreliable narrator, so there's things that the way he sees things, like, really, come on, dude, open your eyes. But it's hilarious the things he gets himself into that way and then gets out of. So
he is such fantastic comic relief. Yes. And this whole book, I was enjoying him so much. And I see the note you have here where you're like, Matt becomes my favorite character. He's a lot of people's really their favorite character. And those first 2 books, I'm like, how is he people's favorite character? But this book, I can start to understand why people really, really love him.
Something that typifies Matt Cawthon that you're gonna continue to see is on display really well when he goes and delivers Elaine's letter. Because as he's going to the palace to deliver this letter to Queen Morghese and be done with it, it's in his thoughts to just get this over with, so I can wash my hands of this whole situation and get on to gambling and living the good life. And then what happens? Well, he discovers things are murkier than he knew, and those 3 girls are in trouble. So now what's he doing? He's headed to Tyr. It's like one thing after another. All he wants to do is live the good life. And all he does is help people. is
Yeah.
take responsibility. I think he said it once in the Dragon Reborn. I'm no bloody hero.
Yeah.
He's gonna say that many times because that's what he keeps trying to convince himself, and his actions say otherwise. He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
That's awesome. And he also seems like the kind of character where, like you said, he just kind of stumbles from situation to situation to situation where, he's like, I just want to go somewhere and relax, but he keeps getting thrown into like this whirlwind of events. I could totally see that happening to him.
Yep.
I think my standout for this book, if it's not Matt, it's Perrin. And I really liked everything Perrin did in this book. Everything from saving the Aiel in a cage, which I was floored to see that they did that in episode 3 of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
I think we'll see something else there, though. I don't think that's the end of an Aiel in a cage right there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that moment that Perrin had with the Aiel. I liked how he is trying to not become a wolf, basically. Like, he is trying to find this balance. Like, sometimes he needs to use the wolves, but most of the time he's trying to like shut them out so that he doesn't become, because he sees this other guy who has the same thing, and he's trying to not become him. And so yeah, I just really liked that whole storyline. And then what's her name? His girlfriend,
Fael.
She goes into the room in the inn, and there's the hedgehog, and she falls unconscious, and he has to go into the dream world to find her. And then there's just this really sweet scene when she wakes up. She's like, my blacksmith. And I was tearing up a little bit, but
it's a sweet scene.
It's a sweet scene.
And you're right to wonder then. So where does this go? Is this a thing? Is this a moment?
Yeah.
You'll find out.
Okay, so we already talked about him a little bit, but we have Rand here. And this was a really interesting character in this book because he gets very little screen time, and he's not a point of view character.
Right.
Do you have any insight into why Robert Jordan did it this way?
It was a way that he could emphasize that Rand was going through some stuff. So we don't actually see from his point of view so much, and therefore it leaves it a little more mysterious as to what's really happening. But it also allowed him to give a lot more screen time to the other characters and kind of establishing some of the storyline that he wanted, particularly Matt, who we had no POV for the first 2 books. So that's really was kind of some balance, the way he's like, I gave you lots of Rand, now I'm going to give you a lot of the others.
Okay, is this something that we're going to see from this book onward? Is more POVs in one book, a more diversity of people, but also maybe some books without Rand?
Sort of. You're going to definitely see a lot of different POVs. Those are completely changing stuff. You're never going to have another book with no Rand or so little of Rand.
Okay.
There is one book, I think it's book 10, where we don't get much of Rand until the second half of the book for reasons.
Okay.
And they're explained reasons. But you will see a couple of other key characters just totally disappear for a book.
Okay.
Because it's explained what they're doing, but RJ doesn't talk about that storyline for a whole book. And then, ta-da, that one's back the next book, and a different one dropped away. It's just there's so much to cover that happens.
Okay. Very cool. Um, I probably could have put this in the magic section, but I remembered that Rand learns how to teleport, or is travel the right word? Um, or is that what it is, that what he's doing in this book? I don't even know.
You're talking about right there at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's still a
Balal
lot
and
of
him, or
theory as what
Balsamon.
really is happening, but uh, sort of. He's sort of
Okay,
teleporting. It's something that will be clarified later, but you're right.
okay.
He's opening a portal and he's stepping into something else. Yeah.
Earlier you had talked about the the physics of everything, how Robert Jordan was really into I think it was astrophysics.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of this idea of, if we were to learn how to travel in space, there's kind of this sci-fi idea of folding space around you. And it kind of sounded like that's what Balsamon and Rand did at the end there, because it said Rand felt like there was a folding, and then Balsamon disappeared, and then he was able to open and fold, and now he was in a new place. I was like, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. It's that old age-old image of a piece of paper folded in half and you stick the pencil through. He's doing something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. There was also, this is so like dumb and small, but there was also somebody was having a dream, and I think it might have been Perrin, and he walked in on, I think, Lanfear, and then
Mm-hmm.
it said the dream became like a 2D image and folded to the side, and it was like a piece of paper, and then it like went away. I'm like, man, there's some really trippy things that happen in these books. I really like those scenes.
Yeah, and you're going to get a lot more of that sort of stuff going on, but you'll better
Okay.
understand what you're seeing too as we go further and further in.
Okay, cool. What did you think of the girls' storyline in this book? I'm kind of wrapping them all into one: the Egwene, Nynaeve,
Yeah.
and Elaine.
Often I was like, girls, how stupid can you be? Like overconfident to the extreme.
Oh
They they
yeah,
just they just cannot fathom that somebody will outthink them or that they won't have anticipated everything. And certainly they don't need anyone.
right.
I mean, criminy, their butts are pulled out of the bacon or fire or whatever. I kill my cliches a lot, but all these things where they're in trouble and they are saved repeatedly
Yeah,
in this story, and then they still kind of feel like, well, we really didn't need help.
right. Like when Matt shows up, and like they went into the dream, and they hurt the Black Aja, but they couldn't get themselves out, and then Matt
Mm-hmm.
comes and like opens the door for them and everything, and they're so rude to him.
Totally,
I'm just
totally
like,
rude. That arrogance, that they can't possibly admit that he was helpful. Now, it
yeah,
goes a little bit both ways because Matt's, I'm here to save the day, and
right,
he doesn't acknowledge that, they were already partly working on this. They
right.
both played a hand and neither can admit either had a role. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm
The
mostly on Team Matt.
Oh yeah, for sure. The thing I think is funny is, and don't get me wrong, it's explained why, but it seems a little bit convenient how the Amerlin was like, we got to send these three novices to deal with the most dangerous Aes Sedai out there because you're the only ones who can do it. It's like when I didn't read the Harry Potter books, but I would imagine it's when Harry Potter and his friends go out to fight Voldemort. It's like, okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My son describes that something like that is rather sus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Um, so far in the books, I cannot stand Nynaeve. And I think that's a common I think that's a common complaint, but I also know that at some point in the future, she becomes a lot of people's favorite character, right?
My first time through, I felt just like you're describing. Could not stand her. But yeah, she goes on a journey. So you'll eventually probably feel differently.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, she has this moment, and I couldn't tell if it was because she's like trying to get herself angry or whatever, but it's when the Aiel they meet the Aiel on the river or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And they're one of their guys is hurt, and Nynaeve is trying to heal them. And they're talking about battles and stuff, and she's like, swords and muscles, stabbing people, stabbing women. Just like
working herself
down.
up. Yep. Yeah. And definitely the fact that she can't channel unless she is angry enough plays into the personality quirks.
Yeah.
But that's not all of it. There's more in her background too as to why she's so ornery. And it all does really have some reasons, but doesn't change the fact that she's just a pain in the butt for a lot of these first books.
Exactly. Like right from the, from right after the Trolloc attack, I was like, man, in Eye of the World, I was like, man, I really don't like Nynaeve, because she's like, Moraine has a reason that she's bringing these. She's not just trying to steal these farm boys. And Nynaeve is like, you can't take them. It's like, shut up, Nynaeve, you don't know what's going on.
She was so judgmental without enough information, and then judging that she's not being given the information. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think I also share the complaint that Egwene has, is she still thinks of herself as the village wisdom, as like the person with some of the most authority around. And so I'm interested to see her character arc.
Yeah, it's worth the ride. It's good.
Oh yeah.
Now we've already said how much these characters are awesome, and we get very invested in them. And so I'm going to drop something on you here. This is not a spoiler entirely. Okay. It's a hint, like my podcast does. It's a hint, something to be aware of. A lot of people like to compare A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, with the Wheel of Time, and how different they are from each other. But in one way, there's something similar. These characters you're getting invested in, they may not all make it to the end.
Okay. All right. I was actually wondering that today. I was thinking, like, I don't know if this is the kind of series where they kill off characters, because a lot of modern fantasy, you start with 6, and by the second or third book, you're down to 3. And I'm like, I haven't seen anybody die yet. Like even Tam, the dad, I thought he was going to die in Eye of the World. And so I was
through. Yeah.
I was kind of questioning. I'm like, will Robert Jordan kill any characters? And I was kind of thinking that he won't. So it's good to hear that, there's people who don't make it through, and it has those moments.
Yep. So there's 14 books. I'm not going to tell you where it happens.
Sure.
But have faith.
For sure. Real quick, one thing I have to say about Moraine is, and I don't know if we talked about this earlier, but she says that she has learned a lot this past year, dangerous things. And I'm wondering, is this something, are these dangerous things she learned something that happened in The Great Hunt when we didn't see her very much, or was it before the series? Have we seen this at all?
We believe it's what she learned during The Great Hunt. She spent that time studying at Adelaus and Van Dien's cabin, their little retirement shack where they had all these resources, and she learned some things there. And we don't have it locked down, confirmed. This is just what the theories are, what we believe. We think that's where she learned balefire. She didn't know it earlier than that, but she came upon this forbidden weave and was able to figure out how to do it through her research there. That's one of the dangerous things she's learned.
Okay. Awesome. What about this this Gabriel guy? You know, I don't have a lot to say on him, but it looks like he's plotting against Elaine. And then the guard that escorted Matt out of the tower or whatever seemed a little suspicious of him, and everybody in the town has noticed differences in the way things are run ever since he got hired. It looks like he's gonna marry the queen.
Right.
And so yeah, I'm kind of wondering if he's gonna be, I mean, he's obviously like a dark friend to some extent, but I'm wondering if he's gonna be one of these bigger bads in the coming books. So
I like the way you're thinking. You're definitely going to see more of Gabriel for sure. They painted a picture of him having an odd amount of influence out of nowhere, suddenly becoming this big guy and looking like he's on the fast track to marry the queen. It's kind of suspicious, and clearly he's up to no good.
Yeah, I was going to say, part of me thinks that he has somehow done something to the queen's mind, or some sort of manipulation is involved there in order for him to, because we just saw Camelin. Did we see Camelin in the second book?
We saw it in the first book.
Because we weren't there too long ago. And so this is something that's happened pretty recent, right?
Yeah, just over the past 4 to 5 months that this transformation changed from when Rand first met her and she was this strong, fully in control, charismatic authority, to now being this person who's kind of, oh, Gabriel. And yet in that scene, you know, she was not entirely happy with Gabriel all the time. You know, like when he took the letter out of her hand, she was like, hey, you know, she didn't like that. But she still didn't stop him. So, there's something going on there. Maybe your theory is onto something.
Right on. All right. Well, if there isn't any other characters you would like to talk about from this book, do you want to talk about some of your quotes here?
Yeah, you know, I pulled just a few quotes. There's so many great things that come out of here, but there are a few that really stand out for me from this one. And that we already mentioned earlier that we get a much bigger dose of Aiel in this one. And that scene where the Aiel come and save Nynaeve, Elaine, and Egwene from the Fades and the Dark Friends that are selling them to the Fades. There's that great moment when after the battle's over and the girls are, you know, then we're not sure, did we just mess things up by taking away the fighting from the Aiel by killing the Fades? And apologizes if that's necessary. And Ruark, the older, the clan chief, has this great line: for the young, death is an enemy they wish to try their strength against. For those of us a little older, she is an old friend, an old lover, but one we are not eager to meet again soon. And Nynaeve liked that line because she's like, finally, I meet an Aiel who's not insane.
Right, yeah.
But it showed us also a little more balance to the Aiel. They are not one note. Hey, let's fight. No, there's complexity. There is more to them. So that's a great quote. The other one that really jumps out to me is it's a little longer, but it's worth repeating because it's from early on when Zareen and Perrin meet. And of course, Zareen, who goes on to be called Fael. But Zareen's still just trying to make her impression and known as she's jumped onto the boat as they're trying to pull away from that one town heading down to Ilion. And she insists this, you know, who are you? I call myself Mandarb.
Oh, yeah.
And Perrin just loses it. It says he could not stop the guffaw that burst out of him. Those tilted eyes of Zareen regarded him with heat. I will teach you something, farm boy. Her voice remained level, barely. In the old tongue, Mandar means blade. It is a name worthy of a hunter of the horn. Perrin managed to get his laughter under control and hardly wheezed at all as he pointed to the rope pen between the masts. You see that black stallion? His name is Mandarb. Land's horse. That's a great moment.
I love that. Absolutely. And I think it's so funny. She's such a funny character at the beginning because I feel like she wants so badly to be not just accepted, but like looked up to as like this great hunter of the horn. And like, she wants to be known for this, but the horn has already been found. And when she finds that out a little bit later, she's like, wait a minute. And she just like totally deflates. And that's really when we see her start to kind of chill out a little bit. And Perrin and her end up talking more and more. I think that's a great moment.
Yeah.
That's
really all I had for quotes, but do you have something that really jumped out for you?
No. So I have this quote by it's from Tom to Matt, and it's men forget but never forgive, women forgive but never forget. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, that is so true.
Yeah. Robert Jordan, it's one of the big elements of this series, the way he's kind of portraying the difference between men and women. And many will say he doesn't get it right all the time, but it certainly does play into the humor that's embedded in the story.
Yeah, definitely. Other than that, I have had a hard time kind of finding quotes for this series. I don't know if it just like, what would you say that the prose is like in these books? Because I feel like you have everything from super, super dry to really flowery and poetic. And I feel like this isn't very dry, but it's definitely not like King Killer, if you've read those.
Yeah, I haven't read those yet, but I am familiar with them. They're on the TBR along with about 300 other books.
Yeah.
But the prose, it varies. At times there's sections you read that are just unbelievably awesome and they just hit you and it's so well written. And other times it's just a little bit more about the lightness, the humor, or even some action that happens and just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
But I think it's good prose. It's not weak writing in any way.
Definitely.
He definitely gets across the feelings, the depth that he's meaning to, and in times it really hits home hard. And that's when the prose has entered next level because you forget you're reading. You're in it and you're caught. Yeah, absolutely. That's always a good sign.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of our favorite moments, but I was wondering, what are your favorite moments, but also what are some moments in this book that I should be taking a close look at, or something that should have caught my eye?
Wow. There's so much. That last question, we could do a whole podcast on, a whole episode. Because there's just so much here. I'll emphasize two particular scenes from here that are in my favorites, partly because of what happens, but partly because of the impact that's to come.
Okay.
Where there's things revealed here that are going to be huge later in the series, and you have no way to know that yet. So I'll just say, remember this. And, I think they're ones that, you're pretty on top of enjoying as well. So
Okay.
one of them is certainly when Matt is in Tarvalon still, and he's recovered. He's been healed. He's recovered enough that he decides to go for a walk. He's still not very strong, but he, kind of stretching his legs, and he comes upon the warder training ground and sees Gawain and Galad there training, and kind of makes a wisecrack, and one thing leads to another, and he's going up against the two of them, him with the quarterstaff, them with their practice swords, and he whoops their butts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even close, but the whole scene is done really, really well. It's written really well, but it's also very entertaining. But the fact that he's able to do that with a quarterstaff, and the dude is good. He's good with a stick.
Right.
Remember that. That's going to have relevance. Okay.
Okay.
But also the way Gawain and Galad interacted with Matt, their approaches to this, the comments they make, that's all very telling on what's going to happen with those characters moving forward too.
Okay. Very good.
The other one that I'd highlight that I really enjoyed, and I think we mentioned it once earlier, well, at the Stone of Tyr, when Matt uses the fireworks to blow a hole so that he can get in. Of course, he had no idea it was going to blow a hole the size that he just blew. I'm just going to cram some of this in and back up, and he just about blows himself up.
Right.
That's a great moment. Great scene. Love it. So Matt,
Yes.
But
absolutely.
it's also really significant what he's discovered can be done with these fireworks. That they can go big boom. There will be payoffs down the road. So watch for that. It's not going to be immediate. It's going to be stuff, though, that will harken back to first what he was doing at the fire with just opening them up. And then what he ends up doing at Tyr. It's like there's some light bulbs going off that are going to be relevant later.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was funny when he was at the fire with Tom, and he's like opening it up, and Tom's like, "Don't you know those things explode 3 times as much when they're exposed to air?" And Matt's like, "I don't think so."
Tom had a great line there where he said, if I want to die when we get to Camelin, I'll go pinch Morghase's butt. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That made me laugh.
I don't need you to kill
loud.
us. Yeah.
I definitely remember that. Speaking of the Stone of Tyr, so if the answer is a spoiler, if you're not able to answer it vaguely, then that's fine. We can skip it. But I'm kind of wondering what now happens to the Stone of Tyr. Like, is it still did Rand like take over the Stone of Tyr? Is that like the dragons? Because it seemed like at the end there, all the people of the dragon were there, and maybe I misread, but it sounded like they stayed there. I don't think I read about them leaving at all. And so
no, you're right. They stayed there. Yeah.
Okay.
You have interpreted this correctly. He's conquered with the help of the people of the dragon, and it's his now, the Stone of Tyr.
Okay.
Book 4 is going to pick up right where this left off, basically. So you're going to start up in Tyr again, and you'll get better clarification of what happens now. What does this mean? So I won't explain that because that's what you're about to start reading.
Okay. And then also, do we know how Rand got inside?
Yes. He got inside. You see it in the book where Matt sees somebody else scrambling up the side of the wall of Tyr, scrambling, just climbing up the side. It's just a shadow, a silhouette that he sees, but that's Rand. So he's skittering up there at the same time that Aiel are climbing the rooftops and trying to get in too. Rand is he's not with them, but he's doing it first. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Very cool. And then he probably went in through like a window or something, something from the
Yeah,
top.
exactly. He seems to have the same kind of abilities as all the Aiel do. He's kind of built like them. He kind of looks like them, and he can climb like them.
Yeah, weird.
Might be significant.
Might be significant. um, so one thing real quick that I really liked about this book right from the beginning, it's in like the first chapter, is we really notice how much everybody has kind of grown, even though, I don't think it's been that long of a timeline since the first book, but I feel like these guys are growing up very fast. And Perrin even mentions that the world is that he's learned a lot in the past year, and that the world is a more violent place than he once thought it was. And so we start to see this kind of naivete and innocence kind of being shed off. I think especially with Perrin.
Yeah. And there will be more of that. But since you mentioned time, and there hasn't been that much time, there was, from the time they left the Two Rivers to where they are now, it's been almost a year.
Okay.
There's a chunk of time during the Great Hunt where they went the Portal Stone world, and they lost 4 months of time right there. But there had already been some traveling time. And so like Egwene, she was a prisoner in Falme of the Shan-Shan as a Damane for about 4 months. I mean, there's a good chunk of time that passed there. And then they waited in the mountains at the beginning of this book. They were in the mountains. They had been there for much of the winter. And it was long enough for Varen and the girls with Matt to have walked all the way back across the continent again to get to Tar Valon. So all told, we've got about a year that's gone by since the beginning. And yet the rest of the series is only going to cover a little more than another year. So we've had these jumps, but then something's going to change so that we're going through, we're covering a lot of territory, but not a lot of time.
Interesting. Okay. Another one of the scenes that was really emotional was Egwene having to go through her trials. And I said in the Great Hunt video I did as well that Nynaeve going through those trials was very heartbreaking. And Egwene's were just absolutely so sad. She sees her and Rand married, and Rand is having these headaches, and they can't figure out what it is. And then she sees Rand stuck under a beam, and he's going mad, asking her to kill him. And then this one was a little confusing for me, but she sees herself sitting in the Amerlin seat, and Rand is brought in on charges of claiming to be the Dragon Reborn.
Right.
And she can't, she doesn't want to sentence him to death or gentling. And then she wakes up in a room with Murdral, right? Do I have that right?
Yep, the Murdral. You are correct. Yeah.
Okay. And
it doesn't matter what she does, she can't save Rand. In all of these, she can't save Rand. Yeah. Okay. But then that last one, you're right. There's real significance there, because when she wakes up with those Murdral, she's got women channelers and Murdral, and they are about to, we learn something that can be done there. And it's referenced again later when the Amerlin seat confirms it. They were going to turn her.
Turn her or gentle her?
Nope. They were going to turn her, meaning they were going, it's something they can do with the power. Instead of gentling, they could turn her to the Dark One.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So good Egwene would have become evil Egwene. Now that's a scary thing that's possible. You can do that to someone. Remember that.
Okay. For sure. And it takes 13 people, right? I think
it takes 13 channelers and 13 of the Murdral, those shadow spawn fades. You got to have 13 of both.
So are we going to learn what the difference is between like how a Murdraw comes to be, or how a Trolloc comes to be, or are these all just creations of the Dark One?
You're going to learn. Yeah.
Okay.
It hasn't been fully revealed yet. You are going to get those pieces as we go through. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Oh, Perrin, one of my favorite scenes in this book, it's such a small one, but Perrin, they've gotten into Tyr and he notices a blacksmith shop,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
he goes to work in this blacksmith shop for a day, and then he does some more work later, but
Mm-hmm.
he says that it feels like being home.
Yeah.
And this was just such a pleasant scene to watch him kind of doing his thing. And like there was a part of me that was like, I wish he could just stay there and
Yeah.
be the
Yeah.
apprentice to this guy. And you know, I totally get the feeling of what he's experiencing, because I would imagine, you know, I'm a carpenter by trade, and I would imagine that if I was, you know, away from work for however long, and I've gone through all this stuff, and I come across, you know, someone building a house or a furniture building place or something, I would be like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, can I just work on something for like an hour, you know?
Yeah. So you can
And
relate to that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. And I just love that moment where the guy was like, you know what, you're actually really good. Like, why don't you help me with some of the things that
Yep.
my apprentices, you know, they left, and so they didn't finish. And so I just really love that moment. And I feel like every now and then there's one of those moments that are just kind of these quiet moments where everything kind of
Mm-hmm.
settles down and you're able to kind of just hang out for a minute. And so
Yeah.
I really liked that.
Yep. And that's teaching us something of Perrin's character. What's the core of him? He just wants to be a blacksmith. He just
Yeah.
wants to have a quiet life. And that's going to be a recurring theme that RJ does some amazing things with along the way. So you'll enjoy that.
Yeah. And now he's got the hammer. The guy gave him the hammer.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I just thought that was cool. Um,
Totally.
oh, Matt kills one of the guys looking for Elaine in that bar. That was
Mm-hmm.
I love any of the scenes where Matt is using his staff and
Yeah. See
just
that
kicking
quarterstaff. There
butt.
you go again.
Yeah,
Um, and that guy, that's the same guy, Lord Komar, that he'd overheard when he had snuck into the garden.
right.
Yeah. So caught up with the same guy, ends up killing the same guy. Even though that guy was apparently one of the best ever with a sword of the Queen's guards. But, you know, quarterstaff, ha, and
Yeah.
Matt's luck.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of around the time where Matt figures out, if I do things that are more 50-50 odds, then it tends to work in my favor. And I think he's like flipping a coin outside each inn or
Yeah,
something to
yeah.
kind of determine where to go.
He needs to let it be random. And that's how
Right.
things fall his way. Yep. There's just that
Yep.
one thing at the end where Rand does defeat Baalzamon. Now,
Yeah.
we've seen him defeat Baalzamon at the end of the first book and at the end of the second book. And he kept coming back. Now, here it is in the third book, and he did it again, but there is something different this time. There's a
There's a body.
body.
Yeah.
Right. So he's like, of course, yes, I killed the Dark One, because that's what he still thinks he's doing.
Right.
But no, he didn't. And Moraine tries to clarify, you know, even if you'd killed the Dark One, it wouldn't have just left a body laying on the ground here.
Right.
But this person, this body, this isn't even who you were really fighting. This is just the body that was used.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's something more that's going to come from that. So if you
Okay.
had the sense that, maybe it's not 3 times and you're out. It might be leaning the right direction here. This guy,
Okay.
there's something unusual here for sure.
Well, yeah, they said that that it was, if I understood this correctly, they were saying it was one of the Forsaken who was posing as Balsamon or as the Dark One or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of leaves it open. Obviously, you can't tell, like, don't tell me too much, but like, what is their goal from here on out? Are they just like seeking out the Forsaken to kill all the Forsaken? Is that kind of what their plan is from here?
I can't tell you too much about that,
Okay.
but
No worries.
I can tell you from what you know already. The reason Rand came here to Tyr and then took Kalendor was because of prophecy. He was fulfilling prophecy. Well, there's a lot more prophecy that needs to be fulfilled.
Okay.
So it might be logical that that's part of what drives what happens further into the books. That we gotta deal with these prophecies.
That would be interesting for him to purposely seek out things to do in the prophecy, like following a kind of a guide, because usually a prophecy is like foretold and then the chosen one just kind of ends up doing it. But he has the prophecy, so he could literally like read it and like, oh, now I got to go to this place.
Of course, prophecies don't often kind of have that clarity. They can mean lots of different things. That could be part of what keeps the story interesting.
Right. And then lastly, Moraine has an unbroken seal, right? They got an unbroken seal at the end. Okay.
Yeah, so we know there are seals that are broken. Now we also know there are some that aren't, apparently. So that's good.
Okay.
Because those are the seals on the Dark One's prison. If they're all broken, that might be a problem.
Do we know what breaks them?
No, we do not.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that is pretty much all I have for favorite moments, I think. I have some future book like questions or like theories, but they're mostly like just stuff I hope to see in the next books. And so I'm curious how the majority of the Aes Sedai will react to Rand really being the Dragon Reborn, because the Red Aja don't seem to care if they're killing the dragon, like the real dragon. And so that was something that kind of confused me at the beginning. I'm like, well, if they're looking for the dragon, why do they keep gentling all these people who are supposed to be the dragon? And I think it just boils down to the Red Aja just want to gentle everybody.
It's a great question to be asking. It is, the answers are going to drive a lot of what you're going to read moving forward. So you're right. Okay. That's a significant and important plot point to be thinking about.
Okay. And then of course my will Perrin and Fael become a couple? I want to see them together. I know a lot of people really didn't like her in this book, and I definitely didn't at first either, but she definitely grew on me as the book went on. And I hope whoever the Hawk is doesn't get in the way of that.
Well, we've referenced many times earlier the significance of book 4.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you're gonna enjoy learning about what happens with these two and perhaps a Hawk in book 4.
Awesome. I'm not really sure what I meant by this last question.
Well, I think I understand. One of the things people wonder, and certainly we're confused about in the first 3 books, is who's the Dark One? Who's Balsamon? What's the difference? What's going on? You know, and we're supposed to understand at the end here that Balsamon most definitively is not the Dark One. The Dark One is something else, something bigger, badder, something that Balzamon was probably working for, maybe,
Okay.
or was influenced by, or maybe he was doing his own thing, but he's also bad. But there's still a dark one out there who has a major purpose on the world. And that also is going to be clarified in book 4.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely super excited to learn more about just kind of like what the bigger purpose is, and how this all fits into things that have happened in past ages. I'm hoping that we learn more about Luce Theron, and in the prologue for Eye of the World, there was the other guy who was there with him, like egging him on. And I'm hoping that we learn more about them. And
You will.
I'm curious, I talked about this on the Great Hunt episode that I did, but I'm curious to see if we will get more glimpses into Rand's like previous lives, like not just Luce Theron, but like, whatever other lives that he's lived. I'm assuming we probably won't, but it would be cool.
It would be cool. Yeah. Yeah. And I can't tell you anything.
All right. Any final thoughts about this book or anything? I really loved it.
I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly.
Yeah.
I'm glad you loved it. I'm glad you're moving forward into the rest of the books, because these first 3, they're great, but it really starts opening up now at book 4, and you are going to have such a ride. So I'm excited for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hopping on this podcast and doing this with me. We definitely went longer than I expected us to, and I'm really sorry, but thank you so much for hanging in there and talking with me about this. And yeah, all right, guys, that is going to wrap us up there. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And of course, a big thank you to Jim from Fantasy for the Ages podcast. We definitely hope to have you on again sometime in the future. If you'd ever like to come on the podcast or talk about a book that we're talking about, you're welcome anytime.
This has been a blast. I'll look forward to that. Yeah,
for sure. And again, listeners, if you would hit those like and subscribe buttons on your way out, we would really appreciate it. And as always, you can follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, and you can follow Jim and his son on Twitter at Fantasy for the Ages, and that's the number 4 in their Twitter handle there. I'll also have it linked down below in the description. But yeah, stay tuned for more awesome stuff coming up from us. And until next time, don't mess with the Aiel unless you're a fully trained Aes Sedai. All right, see you later, guys.
Bye.